Foundation's second season kicked off 138 years after the events of Season 1. It thrust us back into the galaxy-sized epic that, by pretty much all accounts, came into its own after a debut season that was impressive but also uneven. As a fan of Isaac Asimov's classic sci-fi series the show is based on, and an enjoyer of great TV, I thought Season 2 was an improvement. Some of the changes from the source material started to pay dividends as the show's vision came into focus, and more than anything, it found its balance. Asimov's story is gigantic. It jumps all over the place and skips through time, but the show's best invention, the genetic dynasty on Trantor that mitigates some of that, works so well that it sometimes eclipses the other storylines. Season 2 did a better job of weaving the various story threads together to breathe some life into character stories that felt a bit flat in the first season. I did deep dives weekly through both seasons to break things down, but since not everyone will have time to revisit those or watch all 10 episodes again before the Season 3 premiere, this is intended to be the quick and dirty bullet point recap to help refresh your memory. At the center of everything is Harry Seldon, who through his psychohistory predicted the inevitable fall of the Galactic Empire, which would lead to a new Dark Age. Barbarism is the word Asimov Seldon used, and his mathematical models showed this period would last 30,000 years. Harry's plan was to set up the Foundation to rebuild things in a way that would reduce the dark times considerably. Unfortunately, he died pretty early in that process, way back in the second episode of the series, but his presence is still central to all the major plot lines in Season 2. At the time of his death, he uploaded his consciousness to a data storage device in his adopted son Rach's knife. It stayed there for 100+ years until Gaal Dornick transferred it to the Prime Radiant. That's where we first see Harry in Season 2's premiere. We're introduced to his late wife Yana through visions, who was his primary collaborator in developing the Radiant. Hers was a trustworthy, familiar face to help him get through his isolation, and the apparition later transformed into the mathematician Calais. Her ninth proof of folding was what Gail used to solve the Abraxas conjecture, which led her to leave home to meet Harry on Trantor. Calais' work also appears to be essential to psychohistory and the Prime Radiant's design. When Harry's consciousness eventually gets out, he's not too happy about being stuck there for so long, and there's quite a bit of tension with Gail on that front. What's worse, his original plan to create a second Foundation is entirely off the rails. Rach was supposed to survive after killing Harry and continue to Helicon to establish the beginnings of the second Foundation. He got derailed because Gail came in and saw what happened, and he chose to protect her and stay behind where he died instead. Gail was supposed to be the only psychohistorian on Terminus to help guide the first Foundation. The plan always required both of them. The first Foundation's role was to create a society that could survive the Empire's fall without explicit knowledge of the Seldon plan. This was crucial because foreknowledge might influence their decisions. The second Foundation was supposed to be established at the same time and be made up of psychohistorians who knew the plan inside and out. That way they could serve the role of intervening to get things back on track when necessary, but otherwise they would be hidden entirely. Harry understood that an unchecked first Foundation would eventually become Empire all over again, so he's scrambling to get things back on track throughout the second season. He's held back a little bit because being a digital ghost has limitations, so he sets up a pit stop on an abandoned mining planet called Una's World. There he finds Callie waiting for him, and she gives him a body to inhabit somehow. The details are left vague and unexplained, as is Callie's true identity, but from that point on, this version of Harry presents just as he did before he died. Most of the Harry and Gail stuff is to set up what happens between them at the end, but Callie's introduction seems like something that will be important in the future. Is she a manifestation or a sentient being operating on a level above the rest of the characters we've met? It's hard to say for sure based on what we've seen. Bringing Harry back to life or putting his consciousness in a physical body is a show-only invention, so we're firmly in this could go in a lot of different directions territory. story. Thematically, it touches on the nature of consciousness and reality. It shows him evolve from a digital form who's dependent on Gail to enact his plans to an actual player in the game going forward, and highlights the unseen variables in the plan. Callie's intervention is something Harry doesn't fully understand himself. It shows that even though psychohistory has incredible predictive power regarding the masses and how they'll behave, it can't predict every minute detail, especially related to the actions of extraordinary individuals. Through flashbacks, we learn about Harry's childhood with an abusive father on Helicon. We see how he met his wife and fell in love, as well as her contributions to psychohistory. At one point, he refers to it as their only living child, which turns out to be a reference to her being pregnant at the time of her death. His work had caught the attention of the Empire, which used his university's director to pressure him into relocating to Trantor, where they could monitor his work more closely. Despite Yana's insistence on using the move as part of a strategy to undermine the Empire from within, Harry refused on principle. He just wouldn't do it. This led to tragic consequences when she was taken hostage to force Harry to give up the Prime Radiant and then was accidentally killed. Because of a pendant Yana gave Harry to let him experience their unborn child's heartbeat, he felt the exact moment when they died. This revealed a darker side of Harry, who devised an elaborate plan to get vengeance, and who did kill the director in the end of that. Then he accepted the position on Trantor, which can be interpreted as him following Yana's idea of infiltrating the Empire to get his revenge from the inside. As mentioned, this shows Harry Seldon, the man, had a darker side, and didn't necessarily live up to the narrative his followers built around him as their prophet. Losing Yana made his resistance to the Empire personal, which adds some balance considering how impersonal the mathematics of psychohistory are. After Una's world, Gail and Salvor Hardin are drawn to the planet Ignis by the powerful mentalic Telem bond. When she discovers Harry's intention to create a second foundation, she tries to drive a wedge between them before drowning Harry. Telem is most interested in Gail's abilities and her body, which Gail uses to switch places with Harry while he's drowning to save him. Then she's able to deceive Telem's followers, who are all capable mentalics, to conceal this, but I'll come back to that when I get into her story. This version of Harry was supposed to reunite with Rach on the Raven and head to Helicon. But he also created another version of his consciousness that resides in the vault on Terminus. Vault Harry had his memories edited so that he's in the same boat as the first Foundationers, unaware of the whole plan or the existence of the second Foundation. Early in the season, he acts as a vengeful god when he vaporizes the Warden and makes a mystifying request for Hober Mallow by scrawling his name on the vault. Later, it'll be revealed that that was related to an unplanned meeting with Salvor, but when he meets with Hober to send him on his mission, he also sends Polly Verisov and Brother Constant to Trantor to get Brother Day's attention. He uses them to lure Empire to the vault, and then mocks his attempts to defy psychohistory before telling him he isn't a true outlier. In a surprising twist, he also gives the Prime Radiant to Demerzel, telling her to invent a better future. Gail's story starts with a surprise reunion with Salvor, who turns out to be a daughter she never knew existed, who's actually older than her because of the time she spent in cryosleep. She wakes up on her home planet, Synax, which has been ravaged by the climate change we saw occurring in the first season. Things are strained because Gail's still processing Rachel's death and Harry's plan and how that all works together, and Salvor is a little over-eager to bond with her biological mother. When they check the Prime Radiant, they realize the timeline has diverged from Harry's predictions in a way that could lead to a cascade of crises that the galaxy will never recover from. While her path in the second season leads to Ignis, she also experiences visions of the future. To better understand a coming crisis, she simulates a drowning like the Synaxian seers used to, and encounters the mule for the first time 150 years in the future. She learns that the powerful telepath telepath has taken over most of the galaxy and is searching for the second foundation. He mentions Hober Mallow, which is how Salvor eventually passes that information on to Bald Harry, and Gail also sees a future where Salvor dies in the fight against the mule. This part of Gail's story tackles the idea of free will versus determinism, which is something that I'm going to keep coming back to. While psychohistory doesn't claim that the ink is dry and the future can't change, Gail's experience with her visions is that they always come true. So she interprets anything she sees in them as an inevitability. So she spends most of the season grappling with the idea that Salvor's death is set in stone, which is something I'll return to in a minute. The other thing about Gail is that unlike Cleon the 17th, she is an outlier with abilities that can disrupt psychohistory's predictions. For it to work correctly, the masses need to be ignorant of what it predicts, an ineffective axiom for individuals who can see future events. This shows why the mule is such a unique threat, but also reinforces the show's assertion that even though the actions of a given individual don't influence things directly on the galactic scale, they are still an essential part of the picture. Something that Harry has to learn in his time with Salvor and Gail. On Ignis, we're introduced to various mentalics with powerful abilities who have all been brought together to help them escape the othering and abuse they experience on their home planets. Once Gail and Salvor get settled in there, Tellum uses Gail's visions and fears about her daughter's death against her. I've already revealed her motivations, and by the end we see that Gail does turn the tables and uses her abilities to manipulate Tellum instead. She saves Harry, and with his help and Salvor's, they prevent Tellum from taking over her body. That was her ultimate plan. She continues to exist by jumping from one person's body to the next and basically making it as if they never existed. While it appeared that Harry killed her, Tellum transferred her consciousness and was able to take over a young member of the group named Josiah and attempted to use his body to kill Gail. Salvor intervenes to save her, but it ends up being a sacrifice because she suffers a mortal wound in the process. While her death was a significant blow, she used her final words to point out to her mother that her death on Ignis was proof that the future could be changed. It offered hope and served as the catalyst for Gail and Harry to train Tellum's mentalics as the second foundation. For the next year they do that, and then they enter their cryosleep pods, planning to wake up once a year to monitor their progress and prepare for Gail's eventual face-off with the mule in 152 years. On Trantor, we're introduced to a new batch of Cleon clones, numbers 16, 17, and 18. We see that they're experiencing the effects of genetic drift due to the tampering discovered at the end of Season 1, and their empire is also in decline. After the destruction of the Star Bridge, they slap some new man-made rings around the capital planet as a show of strength, but their power over the galaxy, particularly the outer worlds, is starting to fade. 17, the current Brother Day, sitting on the center throne, has come up with a radical idea to get things back on track. Or maybe just get rid of the track altogether. He plans to end the genetic dynasty by taking a bride and producing a naturally conceived heir. Brothers Dusk and Dawn aren't really on board, but they're also not in a great position to change his mind. But surprisingly, Demerzel seems to support his decision. We also learn that they've been sleeping together, which isn't something we've seen her do with his predecessors in Season 1. His would-be bride, Queen Sereth of Cloud Dominion, brings chaos with her to the Imperial Palace. Partially just because that seems like her style, but also because she believes that Day is responsible for the tragic accident that killed her entire family. This sudden development left her uniquely unequipped to inherit a fair amount of power, which if nothing else makes her suspicions credible. Things are complicated further because just before she arrived, a group of assassins was able to infiltrate his bedchamber and almost ended this particular exponent of Cleon I. Luckily, he happened to be banging his badass humaniform robot when they got there, so even though he put up a good fight, she still has to swoop in to save him at the last minute. Perhaps the biggest revelation in the second season was Demerzel's true nature and origin, both for the Cleons and for viewers. By season's end, we'll find out that the sex with 17 was a manipulation tactic. She was the one behind the death of Sareth's family and Day's assassination attempt, things she orchestrated so that she could torpedo the wedding plans. And after Dusk goes on a side quest, after finding out his memories could be altered without his knowledge, he learns that it goes much deeper than that. Demerzel is the real power behind the throne, a kernel of truth he takes to his grave, since she has to eliminate him and decant another once he hears her origin story from a digital representation of Cleon the First. While Dusk was sorting all that out with Enjoiner Rue, Brother Dawn had teamed up with Queen Sareth for what she called a bloodless coup, agreeing to be the father of her child, and when in his last act Dusk sends him a signal that he can't trust Demerzel, Dawn and a pregnant Sareth escape Trantor together. While we know that Season 3 will jump ahead 152 years to the time of the mule from Gail's visions, and Day and Sareth should be long dead and gone by that time, this Imperial offshoot line they started is a thing that could come back up in the future. Dusk and Dawn can do all this maneuvering because after Hober Mallow disrupted Day's attempt to execute Polly and Constant by jumping his Whisper ship onto the Imperial landing pad, 17 decided to leave for Terminus to see what all the talk about the Foundation's reemergence in the Outer Rim was all about. Remember, the Empire were left with the impression that the colony had been destroyed at the end of the first season. Reports that Harry's followers were starting to spread and other planets were starting to follow led to Day following Demerzel's suggestion of reinstating General Bel Rios, whom 17 had sent to a prison labor camp for disobeying a direct order. He sends Rios to investigate a planet called Sowena, where he learned that the Foundation was thriving and Harry had achieved prophet status. He was being worshipped in a church of Seldon, and the Foundation's technological advancements were outpacing the Empire. When he gets to Terminus, it's revealed that Brother Day thinks of himself as an outlier. That's what's been driving all his decisions that seem to go against what we've seen from previous exponents. As previously mentioned, Harry shoots down this theory unapologetically, sending 17, who declared he'd be the Cleon who chose peace, into a rage that ends with him ordering the destruction of Terminus. He forces General Rios to do it, which is especially cruel considering they know his husband had crash-landed on the planet after his ship was damaged in the battle. That's not even taking into account all the innocent civilians who live there. And there really aren't any circumstances where you have to give 17 credit, but he did offer Vault Harry the chance to save his followers by renouncing Psychohistory's claims. So after Harry refuses, Day is just keeping his word. He does follow through on that, but not before Demerzel ditches him when she gets an alarm about Dusk and Rue discovering the first's hidden chamber. When confronted, she lays out the truth for him. He'd always been a little off, so she initiated intimacy, hoping to influence him enough to make up for his shortcomings. While he successfully destroys the Foundation's home planet, it comes at a cost. After basking in their destruction, he tries to continue to the other planets that had fallen under the Church of Seldon's sway. This is where Bel Rios draws the line, and when he refuses the order, it's revealed that Hober had made a secret pact with the Spacers, who navigate the Empire's jump ships. They sabotage the fleet so that the ships jump into each other and are destroyed. This has lasting consequences too, because once they're free, the Empire won't be able to travel like they had in the past. Like, this will completely set them back. They won't be able to use jump ships anymore. Day tries to take out his rage on Hober, who pointed out that in the end, Day's predictability made their plan possible. Bel taps in and steps up to take on the fighting until Day gets enough of an upper hand to force him into the airlock to space him. At the last minute, Bel uses a castling device introduced in Hober's story earlier to switch places, and 17 dies in space instead. Season 2's Brother Day has a story that mirrors Gail's regarding free will and determinism. He believed he could be an outlier, which drove his decisions, but in the end his choices fed right into Harry's larger plan, which included using the vault to save everyone on Terminus before it was destroyed. His story also leans into the tendency of the exponents to try to individuate themselves from the others, particularly their immediate predecessor, to be individuals even though before the drift, they were essentially the same man who made the same sorts of decisions. 17's overconfidence made his downfall something to relish. Back-to-back beatdowns from Harry and Demerzel just destroyed his notions of being an outlander or an individual for that matter, and his story of hubris ends as they often do. Season 2 ends with Demerzel decanting replacements for all 3 Cleons at once for the first time. We learned that when the first freed her from her prison under the palace, he altered her programming so that her primary directive was to protect the dynasty. We better understand the conflict that creates, which was evident in her final shot in the first season after she killed Brother Dawn. She is the one in charge, but as she put it herself, she's a puppeteer pulling her own strings. Hers is a story of balance between free will and determinism. At one point, Cleon the First asserts that no one is ever truly free, but it still needs to be emphasized that Demerzel's situation is different. She's bound to one thing, a law to serve Empire, which, if you think about it, even just for a little while, it becomes plain that it isn't so simple to do in practice. It's such a specific and weird constraint for a being with that much capability. To be at the top of the food chain and still be so restrained, it makes you think about Dusk's final words. None of us were free. We were fools to think we ever would be. And I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.